Hey friends, welcome to the Devon Duster sewing tutorial. If you are watching this likely means that you bought my Devon Duster sewing pattern, and I am excited to walk you through how to sew it up. But here's a little bit of info first before we get started with sewing. First, before cutting anything out, test the length of the duster pattern on your body. So just hold up the pattern and make sure you like the length of the hem, and then hold up the sleeve and make sure you like the hem of the sleeve length as well. The pattern is made to have no fringe added. It's just made to regular length. If you were to add fringe, you would take off the amount of inches from the fringe. So let's say you have 4-inch fringe trim, then you would take 4 inches off the hem of the duster and the sleeve if you're going to use fringe on both of those. Next, the seam allowance is included in the pattern. I know it says this in the instructions, but I like to state it here as well. And the seam allowance included is 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to need your scissors to cut it out. You're going to need your pattern all laid out and put together. You're going to need your thread, fringe trim if you're going to use fringe, and then you also need bias tape for the whole neck edge. And the reason I chose a bias tape finish instead of a neck facing finish is because with a bias tape, it's a lot easier to adjust that neckline than it is with a facing, because then you have to adjust the neckline and then the neckline facing as well, which is a little bit more confusing. So that's why I chose bias tape. So no more waiting, let's get to sewing. First, you're going to lay your center back piece out flat, and then you are going to add your bodice front pieces to that at your shoulder and side seam, and those are the seams we will be sewing up first. And you can pin these seams down if that makes you feel more comfortable. And something to note is that if your front and your back bodice hem do not match up, like one is longer than the other, which sometimes happens, especially with these chenille blankets that just have a different stretch property, do not pull those seams, like don't stretch them while you sew to make them fit, because it will make your seam warped. Just sew it up, and then you can even out your hem later on. All right, so you're sewing up your shoulder seam and your side seams with a centimeter seam allowance. Have your first seams all sewn up. Next would be some sort of seam finish. Now, this is not a necessary step. This is just a step that I take. It helps your garments last longer. If you do not have an overlock, or it's also called a serger machine, you could just do pinking shears along that raw edge of your fabric to help prevent fraying, but I like to use my serger to finish all of my raw edges. So I am serging up my raw edges now. And this is what a serge or overlock finish looks like. Now we are ready for the sleeves. Take one of your side seams of your sleeves and fold it over to the other side, matching everything up. And now we will sew along this line. And always remember to back stitch at the beginning of your stitch line and at the end of your stitch line. And now I will do a serged finish for these seams as well. And now it is time to iron all of the seams we just sewed. Next is inserting the sleeve into the armhole. So you will place your sleeve into your armhole right sides together, and I like to make sure to match up this seam with this underarm side seam first and pin, and then make sure to match up your notches at the top. And then you will just pull it out, match those little notches, and pin. And then pin around the rest of the armhole. And when sewing armholes, I find it easiest to sew from within the sleeve. So I'm going to start here. And then you can see right here that this is the where you would put your arm into the sleeve. And if you are using a seam finish, then you will seam finish that edge of your armhole. Now you will iron that armhole, and I find it easiest to iron armholes with a tailor's ham. So you stick it in that armhole, and then it's easier to iron around that curved edge. Now it's time to finish your neck edge with single fold bias tape. First, you will open up your first fold of your single fold bias tape, and you will place this down and line it up with the edge of your fabric. Now you will follow the fold and stitch along the entire line around the entire neck edge. Now with the unstitched edge of your bias tape that has the fold, you will fold that over the raw edge, then fold it again so that everything is enclosed, and you want to make sure your bias tape is completely on the inside. You don't want it to be showing on the right side at all. And now you will stitch that entire edge around all the neck edge. And now we are going to iron around that entire neck edge where you just sewed the bias tape. Now the last step we have to do is hem the sleeves and the hem of the duster, or add fringe or a specialty trim if that's what you're deciding to do. But what I like to do first is try it on just to make sure the hem is what I want it to be with the sleeve. So I am going to add fringe. So I see that I like the length of this because it's going to have a 4-inch trim, and I like it to be kind of over my fingers. And you cannot see the hem of the duster, but I like the hem of the duster as well. So next, since I'm adding fringe, what I'm going to do is I'm going to serge finish and around this entire edge before I add the trim onto it. But I will also show you, if you're going to just do a regular hem, I would also serge around this edge, and then you are going to fold it up about 5/8 and do a stitch around the entire hem. So now I am serging around my entire hem of the duster and hem of the sleeves. Follow this step if you are adding fringe or a specialty trim. I like to line up the trim a little bit over this serge line with the edge of this fringe. And the way I like to do it is give some excess on that end and then wrap this edge around your finished neck edge like that, and then you can start pinning in place, and then we will sew it. Follow this step if you are doing no trim. So what you can do now with this little serger tail, I like to fold this in so that it's hidden in there, and then you can roll up 5/8 on this hem and then start pinning in place. And then you will do that around the entire hem, and you will sew that edge up, and you will do the same on your sleeve. And that is it. You have now completed your Devon Duster. I hope this tutorial was really helpful. I also hope that you love the pattern. It was easy to follow. Please tag me in your finished projects and use hashtag Devon Duster. I would love to see all of your creations and combinations. I do want to show you the full-length duster that I finished as well, and it is a little bit difficult on horizontal camera, but I'm going to try my best. Baby approves.